My name is Tessa, and for the past year, I've been working in Europe, embracing a transformative chapter in my life. The move has been a refreshing change, brimming with new experiences, fascinating people, and the promise of a fresh start. Back home, I left behind my parents and my younger sister, Janet. To be honest, our family was never particularly close-knit. Janet, 8 years my junior, and I have always had a peculiar, almost distant relationship, if you can even call it that. The significant age gap meant we were perpetually in different phases of life. When I was navigating the turbulent waters of high school drama, she was still engrossed in her world of dolls and imaginative play. By the time she reached her teenage years, I had already graduated college and was deeply immersed in building my career. Our lives felt like parallel universes, intersecting only briefly during obligatory family dinners or holiday gatherings. Nowadays, our communication has dwindled to little more than exchanging perfunctory "Happy Birthday" or "Merry Christmas" messages. Before relocating to Europe, I had carved out a comfortable life for myself back home. I owned a charming apartment that once belonged to my grandmother, a place steeped in nostalgia. The story of how I came to own it is quite serendipitous. After college, I secured a promising job in finance, and within 3 years, I was earning a respectable income. Tired of renting, I decided it was time to invest in a home of my own. During a casual dinner, my parents mentioned the apartment my grandmother had bequeathed to my mother in her will. "We've been renting it out," my mother said, her voice warm with reminiscence. "But if you're interested, we could sell it to you." The idea struck a chord. I knew that apartment intimately. Countless Sunday afternoons spent visiting Grandma, helping her tend to her cherished plants on the balcony, and savoring her legendary chocolate chip cookies in the cozy kitchen. The price they offered was reasonable, and the location was ideal, so I seized the opportunity. I paid them $120,000, and for the next 3 years, that apartment became my sanctuary. Then, an incredible opportunity arose in Europe: a better salary, the chance to travel, and exciting new challenges. It was too good to pass up. I decided to keep the apartment, viewing it as my first significant investment. I figured I could rent it out for additional income or return to it someday. One evening, as I sat at my desk in my Brussels apartment, sifting through work emails, my phone suddenly lit up with Janet's name. I did a double take, startled by the unexpected call. We hadn't had a meaningful conversation in what felt like an eternity. For a moment, I stared at the screen, wondering if something was amiss. "Hello," I answered, trying to mask the surprise in my voice. "Tessa, hi." Janet's voice was cheerful, which was both a relief and utterly perplexing.
How are you? How's work going?
"Are you seeing anyone?" Her questions came in rapid succession, as if we were close sisters who regularly shared the minutiae of our lives. I humored her, briefly updating her on my job, mentioning that I was single but focused on my career, and admitting I wasn't sure when I'd return home. "That's actually perfect," Janet said, her voice brimming with excitement. "I just started college. Did Mom and Dad tell you?" "No, they didn't mention it," I replied, realizing how little we'd communicated lately. "Well, I did, and guess what? I talked to Mom and Dad, and they said I could stay in your apartment while I'm in college. Isn't that great? It's only 2 blocks from campus, so I won't need to spend money on transportation. Plus, I won't have to pay rent, which is a huge help." I gripped my phone tightly, struggling to process her words. The casual way Janet announced her plan to move into my apartment ignited a spark of frustration within me. Taking a deep breath, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Janet, wait a minute," I interjected, cutting through her enthusiastic chatter. "You can't just decide to move in there. You should have asked me first, not Mom and Dad." "Asked you?" Janet sounded genuinely puzzled.
Why?
"Mom and Dad already said it was fine." I pinched the bridge of my nose, my frustration mounting. "Because you need my permission, not theirs. You can't just move in because they said so." "But they said," she began, but I cut her off, my tone sharper than intended. "I don't care what they said," I snapped, then softened my voice, regretting my outburst. "Look, Janet, I appreciate that you're trying to sort out your living situation, but this isn't going to work. There was a pause on the other end. When Janet spoke again, her voice carried the same infuriatingly calm tone our mother used when she thought she was being reasonable. I don't see why not. You're in Europe. The apartment is just sitting there empty. It's not sitting empty, I corrected, my patience wearing thin. And what happens when I decide to come home? I could return from Europe at any time. Where am I supposed to live then? Janet let out a small laugh that made my jaw clench. Oh, come on, Tessa. You make really good money at your job. If you come back, you can just rent another place. It's not like you can't afford it. I sat there, stunned into silence. The sheer audacity of her suggestion that I should rent another apartment while she lived rent-free in mine left me speechless. The assumption that my financial stability meant I should simply surrender my home to her was beyond comprehension. No, I said firmly, my voice cold. Absolutely not. I'm not going to rent another place just so you can live there for free. This isn't happening. Janet, but Mom and Dad, she started, but I cut her off again. I don't care what Mom and Dad said, I nearly shouted. The answer is no. Without waiting for her response, I hung up, my hands trembling as I set the phone down. For the next few hours, I tried to distract myself with work, but my mind kept replaying the conversation. I knew this wasn't the end of it. In our family, nothing ever concluded with a single conversation. Sure enough, as I was heating leftovers for dinner, my phone buzzed again. Mom's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring twice, taking deep breaths to brace myself for the inevitable. Finally, I answered. Hello. Tessa. My mother's voice carried that familiar tone, the one that suggested I was in trouble, like a teenager who'd broken curfew. We need to talk about what happened with Janet. I moved to my couch, abandoning my dinner. Yeah, I guess we do. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this, she began. You shouldn't treat your sister like this. She's family. It's just for a little while she's in college. Nothing terrible will happen if Janet stays in the apartment. I ran my fingers through my hair, struggling to keep my voice level. Mom, I can't just let her move in there. What happens when she doesn't want to leave? I'm not going to end up fighting with my sister to get her out of my apartment. Oh, don't be dramatic, Mom scoffed. That won't happen. You don't know that, I countered. Besides, why can't you and Dad help her rent her own place? Why does it have to be my apartment? There was a brief pause before Mom responded. We've already spent all our money on Janet's college tuition. We can't afford to pay rent on top of that. I stood up, pacing my living room. Well, I don't want her living there. Who knows what could happen to the place? And besides, I'm renting it out right now. I'm getting income from that apartment. If Janet moves in, I'll be the one paying the bills while she lives there for free. Well, Mom hesitated, searching for a response. Unless, I added, you and Dad want to pay me rent for Janet to live there. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, Mom's voice returned, sharp and laced with indignation. I can't believe how brazen and selfish you're being, demanding rent from your own sister. What's gotten into you? Selfish. I was the one getting angry now. How is it selfish to want to keep my own apartment? The apartment I bought with my own money, or did you forget that I paid you and Dad $120,000 for it? That has nothing to do with this, Mom retorted. It has everything to do with this, I shouted. I didn't get this apartment for free. I bought it with my hard-earned money. The line went dead. The next week passed in complete silence. No calls from Mom, no messages from Janet, nothing. I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, but it was never them. During a presentation at work, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it, but the caller persisted, ringing 3 more times during my lunch break. When I finally checked, it was Aunt Sarah, Mom's sister. We weren't particularly close, but she'd always been the voice of reason in our family. Disputes hung heavy in the air, a lingering tension that seemed to follow me like a shadow. That afternoon, Aunt Sarah's familiar voice came through the phone, steady but tinged with concern. What's going on with your family, Tessa? I just spoke to your mother, and she seemed, well, not herself. I sighed, closing my office door to shield our conversation from prying ears. It's a mess, Aunt Sarah. Over the next 20 minutes, I poured out the entire story, the unexpected call from Janet, my mother's accusatory reaction, everything. Aunt Sarah listened patiently, offering only soft sounds of acknowledgement as I unraveled the tangled knot of frustration and disbelief. I see, she said when I finished, her voice calm and measured. Have you tried talking to Janet again? I mean, really talking, Tessa. It sounds like there might be a misunderstanding here. What's there to misunderstand? I asked, slumping into my chair, exhaustion creeping into my bones. They want my apartment for Janet. End of story. Honey. Aunt Sarah's tone was gentle but firm, like a lighthouse cutting through fog. Sometimes things aren't as simple as they seem. Call your sister. Video call her, so you can see each other's faces. Try to understand where she's coming from, and make sure she understands your perspective too. I wanted to resist, to cling to my righteous anger, but something in her voice made me reconsider. Maybe she was right. Maybe we needed to clear the air. That evening, after work, I took a deep breath, steadied my nerves, and initiated a video call with Janet. To my surprise, she answered almost immediately. She looked tired, her usually neat hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. Hi, I said, keeping my voice neutral, though my heart raced. Can we talk? Janet nodded, her expression guarded, as if bracing for another argument. I need to understand something, I began, choosing my words carefully. Why are you so set on living in this particular apartment? Why not rent your own place? Janet's face hardened slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. Why should I rent somewhere else when Mom and Dad said I could stay in their apartment? You lived there for 4 years. Now it's my turn. They said it was fine. Her words hit me like a slap. Their apartment? I echoed, disbelief coursing through me. Janet, it's not their apartment. Yeah, she said, lifting her chin defiantly. Mom and Dad's apartment. They inherited it from Grandma, remember? They said I could live there while I'm in college, just like you did. For a moment, I just stared at her through the screen, my mind reeling. Then, without a word, I reached for my laptop and pulled up my files. Janet, I need to show you something. I shared my screen, navigating to the folder containing my property documents. This isn't Mom and Dad's apartment. It hasn't been for years. Look at the date on this deed of sale. Look at the purchase agreement. I bought the Zinter apartment from them. I paid them $120,000 for it. The silence that followed was deafening. Janet's eyes widened as she scanned the documents, her mouth falling slightly open. But that's impossible, she whispered, shaking her head. They told me, they said. Her voice faltered, confusion etching lines across her face. This doesn't make any sense. Why would they lie about this? How could they forget selling you the apartment? I watched her on the screen, her expression shifting from defiance to vulnerability. She looked pale, confused, and somehow younger than she had moments before. A sudden surge of sympathy softened my anger. Well, I said, trying to lighten the mood, at least the money went to a good cause. Mom told me they used it to pay for your college tuition. Janet's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. What? The word came out as a strangled whisper. The money from the apartment sale? I nodded, and she let out a strange laugh that sounded more like a sob. Tessa, I'm on a full scholarship. Mom and Dad haven't paid a cent for my education. Now it was my turn to stare in stunned silence. But Mom just told me last week that they couldn't help you with rent because they'd spent all their money on your tuition. We sat there, frozen in a shared moment of disbelief, processing this new revelation. Then Janet spoke, her voice trembling. Do you remember when I wanted those dance classes in middle school? Mom told me they couldn't afford it because they just bought you a new laptop for college.
What?
I shook my head, incredulous. I never got a laptop from them. I saved up from my summer job to buy one. Janet leaned closer to her screen, her eyes narrowing. And remember that summer camp I wanted to go to, the one all my friends were attending? Mom said they couldn't send me because they just paid for your college application fees. I applied for fee waivers, I said slowly, a chill running through me. I handled all my college applications myself because they told me they'd spent all their money on your new school uniforms. School uniforms? Janet's eyebrows shot up. My school didn't even have uniforms. We spent the next hour trading stories, each one more revealing than the last. A pattern emerged, stark and undeniable. Whenever either of us had asked for something, dance classes, camp, new clothes, our parents had blamed their inability to provide it on having just spent money on the other sister. It was like assembling a puzzle where none of the pieces matched the picture we'd grown up believing. The next morning, I called Aunt Sarah, my head spinning from the revelations Janet and I had uncovered. Aunt Sarah, I said as soon as she answered, my voice tight with urgency. I talked to Janet last night. We found out that Mom and Dad have been lying to us for years. They'd tell each of us they couldn't buy something because they'd spent money on the other, but none of it was true. They told Janet the apartment was still theirs when they'd sold it to me years ago. They told me they spent the money from the sale on Janet's college, but she's on a scholarship. Nothing adds up. I heard Aunt Sarah take a deep breath on the other end. When she spoke, her voice was heavy, with what sounded like long-held guilt. Tessa, honey, sit down. There's something I need to tell you about your parents, something I should have told you years ago. I didn't want to cause problems in the family, but, well, I think it's time you knew the truth about how your parents really treated you and your sister. I sank onto my couch, clutching the phone, my heart pounding. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before she spoke again, her voice thick with regret. Your parents, they weren't what you thought they were, Tessa. They weren't struggling to make ends meet like they always claimed. Your grandmother gave them money every month, a substantial amount, specifically for you and Janet. My hand tightened around the phone, my breath catching. What do you mean, specifically for us? She wanted to make sure her granddaughters were well taken care of, Aunt Sarah explained. But your parents, they spent that money on themselves instead. The bare minimum went to you girls. They'd buy the cheapest groceries, the most basic necessities, while she paused, as if the words were too heavy to speak. While they what? I prompted, though a part of me dreaded the answer. While they lived like royalty behind everyone's backs, she continued, her voice strained. They were always eating at expensive restaurants, shopping at high-end stores. And those trips they took 2 or 3 times a year, their business trips? I felt my stomach drop. Mom and Dad always said they had to travel for work. There were no business trips, Tessa. They were luxury vacations. They'd leave you girls with your grandmother, telling her they were going somewhere with an unsuitable climate for children. In reality, they were staying at 5-star resorts, going on cruises, living it up while you and Janet stayed behind. Memories flooded back, vivid, painful. All those times they dropped us off at Grandma's, their matching designer suitcases in the car trunk. I remembered how excited they'd looked before these so-called business trips, how they'd returned tanned and relaxed. It all made horrifying sense now. How did you find out? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Aunt Sarah sighed deeply. It was an accident. I ran into your mother at a restaurant one day, a very expensive one, when she was supposed to be on a business trip. She was wearing a brand new designer outfit, jewelry I'd never seen before. When I confronted her about it, Aunt Sarah's voice cracked, heavy with pain. She threatened me, Tessa. She said if I told your grandmother, she'd turn her against me. She knew how to manipulate your grandmother, had her completely convinced she could do no wrong. Your mother said she'd make sure I was cut out of the inheritance entirely. And you kept this secret all this time? I couldn't keep the accusation out of my voice. We had a huge fight about it, Aunt Sarah admitted, her voice breaking. Your mother and I didn't speak for years after that. And yes, I kept quiet. I'm so ashamed of that now, Tessa. I should have spoken up, should have done something, but I was afraid. I'm so sorry. You and Janet deserved better than this. You deserved to know the truth. I sat in stunned silence, Aunt Sarah's revelations sinking in like stones in still water. All those years, All those memories of careful budgeting and modest living, it had all been a lie. My parents hadn't been struggling. They'd been splurging, just not on us. I can't believe this, I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. We lived so frugally. Mom would spend hours cutting coupons, telling us we had to be careful with money. They never took us on a single vacation, not one. Everything Janet and I owned came from sale racks or discount stores. Even our groceries. I let out a bitter laugh. Mom would drive across town to shop at the cheaper supermarket, saying we had to watch every penny. I stood, pacing my apartment, too agitated to sit still. And you know what the worst part is? They made us feel guilty for wanting things, normal things kids want. They'd lecture us about being materialistic if we asked for new clothes or wanted to go on school trips. Tessa, Aunt Sarah started, but I couldn't stop now, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. And college, God, the college thing makes me so angry now. Do you know what they told me from the time I was little? They drilled it into my head that they couldn't afford to help with college, that I had to study hard and get scholarships because there was no other way. I spent my entire high school career terrified of getting anything less than perfect grades because I thought my future depended on it. My voice strained, years of stress and anxiety bubbling to the surface. I worked so hard for those scholarships, Aunt Sarah. So did Janet. And now you're telling me your grandmother made specific provisions in her will? Aunt Sarah cut in quietly. She left your mother extra money, a significant amount, specifically earmarked for both of your college educations. It was a condition of the inheritance. Your mother was supposed to use that money to put both you and Janet through college. The phone nearly slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. What? I whispered, the weight of her words crushing. Your grandmother wanted to make sure both her granddaughters would get a good education. She knew how important that was. I sank back onto the couch, feeling as though all the air had been knocked out of me. But Janet and I both went to college on scholarships. They never gave us a penny for tuition. They told us they couldn't afford it. I know, Aunt Sarah said softly, her voice laced with sorrow. They kept all that money for themselves, just like they kept the monthly allowance your grandmother gave them for your care. The next morning, I requested an emergency vacation from work. My boss must have heard the strain in my voice because he approved it immediately. Within 48 hours, I was on a plane home. Janet met me at the airport, and we spent the entire drive to her dorm room dissecting everything Aunt Sarah had revealed. I can't believe they did this to us, Janet kept saying, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. All those times they made us feel guilty for wanting things. We arrived at our parents' house that afternoon. It was surreal how normal everything looked, the same neatly trimmed lawn, the same faded welcome mat at the door. The facade of normalcy felt like a cruel mockery of the truth we'd just uncovered, a house built on lies as flimsy as the stories they'd told us for years. The well-manicured lawn stretched before the house, its vibrant green a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside me. In the driveway sat the same expensive car our parents had always justified as a necessary business expense. How many lies had we swallowed over the years, accepting their excuses without question? My heart pounded as Mom answered the door, her smile bright but fleeting, dissolving the moment she saw both Janet and me standing on the threshold, our faces set with determination. "Girls, what's this about?" she asked, her voice laced with unease. "We need to talk," I said firmly, brushing past her into the familiar foyer of the house. "Where's Dad?" "In his study," she replied, trailing behind us as we navigated the hallway, her footsteps hesitant. "What's going on?" We found Dad in his study, seated at his polished oak desk, engrossed in something on his tablet. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face, as we filed into the room, an unexpected united front. "Well, this is unexpected," he said, his tone cautious. "We know everything," I declared, dispensing with pleasantries. My voice was steady, though my pulse raced. "About the money Grandma gave you, for us every month. About the money she left specifically for our college educations. About all of it." The air in the room grew heavy, the temperature seeming to plummet. Mom's face went blank, her carefully composed expression faltering, while Dad slowly set his tablet down, his movements deliberate. Janet stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "Aunt Sarah told us," she said, breaking the oppressive silence, "about how you spent the money on yourselves, fancy restaurants, expensive vacations, while we were eating budget groceries and shopping at discount stores." I braced myself for denial, for anger, for some heated defense. What I didn't expect was Mom's calm, almost dismissive response. She straightened her designer blouse, her fingers brushing the luxurious fabric, and said, "Well, I don't see what there is to discuss. We did nothing wrong. We fed you, clothed you, raised you. No one can accuse us of child abuse." "Nothing wrong." My voice rose, incredulity sharpening my words. "You took money Grandma gave you specifically for us and spent it on yourselves. We lived the lifestyle we deserved," Dad interjected, his tone maddeningly unperturbed, as if he were discussing the weather. "It was our money to spend as we saw fit." "Your money?" Janet's voice cracked, raw with betrayal. "It was Grandma's money. She gave it to you for us." Mom waved a hand dismissively, her manicured nails catching the light. "What's done is done. You can't prove anything now anyway. The money's long gone." Their casual admission hit like a physical blow, their lack of shame or remorse stealing the breath from my lungs. They weren't even trying to deny it anymore. They simply didn't care. The weight of their indifference settled over me, cold and unyielding. I looked at Janet, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, and something inside me shifted. "You know what?" I said, my voice suddenly calm, resolute. "You're right. The money's gone. But so is our relationship with you." Without another word, Janet and I turned and walked out of that house, leaving behind the lies and the carefully curated facade of our childhood. We didn't look back. That was 6 months ago. Life has changed profoundly since then, and in many ways, it's better. Janet and I now talk almost every day, our once distant relationship transformed into a bond forged through shared truth and resilience. I helped her find a cozy apartment near her college campus, and I cover her rent, a small gesture to support my little sister, who deserves so much more than she was given. Janet, fiercely determined to carve her own path, found a part-time job at a local coffee shop to cover her other expenses, insisting on maintaining as much independence as possible. Last week, we had dinner together at her new place, a modest but warm space filled with her vibrant energy. We talked and laughed for hours, sharing stories, reminiscing about the good moments, and making plans for a future untainted by our parents' deceit. As I looked at her across the table, her smile bright despite everything, I realized something profound. Our parents may have stolen our money, squandered the opportunities meant for us, but in their attempt to keep us apart with their lies, they inadvertently gave us something far more valuable. By trying to divide us, they brought us closer together than ever before, forging a sisterly bond that no amount of money could ever buy. Please feel free to comment below if you liked this. Remember to like and subscribe for more.